various ways of abbreviating things, the usual like little juicy features. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the safe, efficient code in a minute. But of course, we also want to talk about C#8. The main theme here is it's going to be magical. I will, if the demo gods prevail, I will show a little of that as well in this keynote. So, but let's start out with the .NET, with the C# 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3, and this theme about safe and efficient. So if you're writing sort of low-level code, or you're trying to get performance, you essentially have to navigate between the Scylla and Charybdis. That is, garbage collection can be, provide overhead and unpredictability of your performance at the low level. But if you try to avoid garbage collection and you start using structs and things that aren't allocated, then you run the risk of copying too much. And so essentially, we ratcheted up our toolbox for dealing with navigating these waters. And so Odysseus here is going to use span of t to navigate between the two dangers that lurk on either side of the strait here. And there are several language features that are there to enhance the span of t experience and help out with how you can write struct-based and array-based code without getting too much copying. So let's go and have a look at span of t. We are having a lot of flicker here. There we go. So span is essentially this idea that while .NET has
essentially all layers of the mobile site solution together in one single user. The open source technology is at the core of everything we do. .NET Core is fully compatible with all of the open source technology that we use. Microsoft Azure allows us to move forward our DevOps strategy. It's a way for us to manage, maintain, and build out our infrastructure. Cosmos DB changed our entire way of thinking about databases. It immediately transitioned us from relational schema to a totally consumption-based way of using the data and developers defining the rules of how the data is structured.
We know the suite of products that Microsoft delivers will connect seamlessly and integrate quickly. The results of the app have been simply phenomenal. The first year we did 86% more revenue year over year. Last year we did over 55% more revenue.
It'll be a way to connect people. It'll enable communities. Well, I fight cancer because I want it gone.
We will end the pain and suffering caused by cancer in different ways, the app being one of them.
We see a change in the world that applies to healthcare.
Digitalization and the networking between healthcare providers and software development companies is essential to value-based care.
I love Kubernetes. We need to be faster in our development.
Stepping from the development of our own added value services into becoming more and more of a platform provider, it is important for us to deconstruct into microservices, and using Azure Container Service here is the right tool.
The managed Azure Kubernetes service puts us really into a position to not only deploy our business logic in Docker containers, including the orchestration, but it's also really easy through application gateway and API management to manage that exposure and control and meter the access simultaneously.
With our cloud-based development approach, we have set unprecedented speed within the company for product development.
We're seeing a lot of workloads coming that are more occasional or need to be updated very often. Azure Functions are a very good mechanism to speed up and manage the functionality during daily operations. The key with serverless is really that you have a very short way from coding into actual operation of your code.
I'm really proud of working for this project because it really can make a change to the healthcare industry.
Our entire existence has been characterized by looking for the next thing. For some reason, we really need to know. We need to know what's beyond the edge of the visible solar system. The Worldwide Telescope is a software tool that is a personal portal to our solar system and to the universe beyond. What evidence do we have for the existence of Planet 9? The most obvious is the confinement of distant orbits within the Kuiper Belt. When I first got the plots from Mike and Constantine showing us how some of these outer solar system objects are all in these skewed orbits, I was able to draw out all the locations of the objects, and in Worldwide Telescope, that automatically put them in a 3D context. It so turns out that they all point in the same direction.
There are sensors all over the world, also looking up. There's spacecraft orbiting for planetary bodies, and they're sending data back to the Earth. Worldwide Telescope was built with .NET. Data sets are sent into the cloud in Azure. The metadata behind it is managed by a SQL server. It's made accessible to everybody on any browser through WebGL.
Developers have the chance to bring the universe to all of the devices we use in our life, to find ways to piece the universe to express to us through this software. With Planet 9, the amount of additional information that we will learn will be staggering. This will reveal our birth story to us. Collaborations between companies like Microsoft and institutions like Caltech are exceedingly important. Worldwide Telescope and how we've used it is just one example. Planet 9 is the planet of our generation. The next generation will find out what is beyond that frontier.
Hi, this is John Galloway, and today I'm talking to Nicole from the Bing team. And Nicole recently where we talked about how the performance impacts and all kinds of other great impacts are running on .NET Core 2.1. Can you give me an idea of the size, how busy Bing is? I mean, what kind of traffic you're processing here?
Yeah, I mean, Bing.com gets thousands of queries, of search queries per second. We power Bing.com and other API properties.
Customers to tell them that large implementations of .NET, or people are using .NET Core on large production instances, and this is a really cool one. So one thing you call out right at the top of this post is the idea of ready to run images, and I don't think that's that well known. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so ready to run images are this version file format that's available on .NET Core. Basically allows you to pre-compile your assemblies into both native and managed code in the same file, which allows you to basically have this ready-to-run experience. You have managed code that gets jittered usually, but when your images are ready to run, they're essentially ready to run when your program starts, which is very useful for if you have a large application with many assemblies and a lot of managed code. It really helps startup performance and also impacts your working set. So usually this code that is generated is more compact in its representation because there's not a lot of jittering going on that's putting code in different places. So it's all in one image.
Very cool. So as opposed to paying the price of like jitting on each of your servers on a farm, you can kind of do this at build time and blow this out to everybody. Is that correct?
Exactly. The key part of ready-to-run images and .NET Core is that we did have previous technologies like NGen on .NET Framework, but they required admin privileges on the actual machine that you needed to NGen on, and also the fact that it had to be done on the exact machine. So if you have 5,000 machines, that process happens 5,000 times.
Yeah. Okay, so next, this is awesome seeing this chart here. You showed a 34% improvement from upgrading to .NET Core 2.1. So previously you had both .NET Framework 4.7.2 and .NET Core 2.0. So just that bump to 2.1 was a 34% improvement overall?
Yeah, so we basically, when we migrated our code, we were still running on .NET 4.7.2, and then we would switch back between 4.7.2 and 2.0. And so we had both, we saw both sides of 4.7.2 and 2.0. That was phenomenal, 34% improvement, that's right. Microsoft employees, contributing open source has really helped us. My favorite, I have to say, is the vectorization, because it actually had a major impact. But my other favorite one is the combination of work done by Microsoft employee and Ayers and an open source contributor, well known, Ben Adams, where they had de-virtualization and how that impacted when you did it for certain default quality comparators for dictionaries. That was, it was a great sort of synergy between Microsoft employees and open source. So I would say, that's one of my favorites.
And it's really neat, as part of this, my understanding is that you had specific requests and you worked through the public GitHub thing to say, hey, we love this sort of performance improvement or change. And then as part of that collaboration, this shipped as part of .NET Core 2.1 and helps everyone out, right?
That's right. One of the ones that I contributed and sort of opened a pull request, an issue, was this one with Call Indirect. And it's because we generate that kind of code, so you can imagine as in open source, if you have a particular kind of code that you'd like optimized, it's really great. You can just go in and contribute, and that's what we did with the help of the .NET team as well. So it really overall was a great experience. Operating in open source is probably one of the main reasons why I think this performance improvement across so many different things has been seen in Bing.
Cool. Okay, so then one final thing is the actual rolling out to production. And this is just amazing here that within 2 days of the release, you were able to deploy. What is it about .NET Core that allows you to do that?
So .NET Core has basically these two deployment types. One is the shared deployment, the shared runtime, where you will have the .NET tool available on your Linux distribution or your Windows OS. And the other one is this idea of self-contained apps. So for us, we use this idea of self-contained apps, and we're able to basically have the .NET Core runtime be a part of our application deployment. So, which, if you think about it, is extremely cool. You just have your app sitting right besides it is all the core CLR, the GC, the JIT, everything there. So if you think from a perspective of how can you isolate things, it's really cool. On day one you have this application running with .NET Framework. On day two you upgrade it with .NET Core sitting right beside your app. And so when .NET Core 2.1 comes out, for us it's a change in the CS project. It's literally a change in the unit package. We made one character change, and we were able to deploy .NET Core 2.1 2 days after. And that 2 days is just because of some additional validation we had to do. So that was really awesome.
That's so cool. I love here, the focus of this post is on performance, but were there other features you were able to turn on as a result of moving to .NET Core 2.1?
Yeah, so this is another one of these things where the ecosystem really helped. With .NET Core 2.1, you also get Broadly support in the core effects libraries. So we actually used that and were able to get Bing.com Broadly support, which was phenomenal. So not only did we get all these performance improvements, our response size also shrunk a little bit because of using Broadly. So that was also pretty phenomenal.
Wow, that's great. Well, that's all the time we have for this quick look. I'd encourage people to go out and read more on this post. The post is titled Bing.com runs on .NET Core 2.1. And thank you so much for your time, Nicole.
Thank you.
A lot of people think of EPS as a packaging company. I see it as a technological company that also does logistics.
We have millions of mobile users using the native apps on each operating system. Visual Studio tools for Xamarin allowed us to develop a single code base in C# and deploy an application to two completely different mobile phone ecosystems. Xamarin allows us to deliver customer features faster. We also use the .NET Core to manage our web service calls and our business logic that we have embedded inside of mobile application. C# has allowed us to decrease our code size by 64%.
UPS Bots is an automated virtual assistant that allows customers to interact with UPS using conversational interface. Customers that have Facebook Messenger can ask UPS Bot questions about their packages.
The bot framework gave us the ability to build a multiple channel. So if we built it once for Skype, and then we could automatically extend that to things like Facebook. With Lewis, we were able to train our bot to understand natural language without having to code. We're running the bot as a service in Azure, and we adopted Application Insights, which is giving us those analytics and tracking intents so that we can implement additional functionality in the future. Azure gives us the ability to scale up and out automatically. The pace at which technology is moving is really exciting.
And we're back. Nice day, Campbell. Pretty cool. We're back at .NET Conf 2018 by the community, for the community. Here with John Galloway from the .NET Foundation. Thank you, sir. Discover the world of .NET. Lots of great stuff for the next couple of days, eh?
Yes, tons of stuff.
Hopefully you're watching us live right now. You might be at one of the many local parties. Some parties are happening right now live and watching and hanging out and sharing content. But also later this week we're going to have content in your native language. We're also going to see kind of rolling thunder with other events throughout the world, aren't we?
Yep, starting this week and then going through the entire month of October. Yeah, I'll take this one.
So, in case there's any confusion, I am Scott Hanselman and this is John Galloway, and we just want to share with you for a little bit before we get into some more technical content later in the day, some of the cool work that's going on inside the community. We want to showcase the community and the work that you're making, because the whole world is open source .NET, and we don't want to just focus on stuff that Microsoft is making, since something like 60% of the contributions to .NET are now outside Microsoft. It's so important. A couple of the things that we wanted to share with you are some websites that we've been noticing pop up lately. And you brought this one to my attention. This one's called Discover.net. What is going on here?
This is really cool. So Dave Blake is putting this, he's been building it. It's like a labor of love. He keeps adding features on and stuff. So there's things like there's new news, there's projects that he calls out. If you scroll down on the side, this is really cool. He calls up Help Wanted. So on the right side, all these projects where it's like, hey, here's where you can get involved. Here's an issue you can jump in on.
All right, so Help Wanted are like, these are issues that you can jump in and participate in. These are open source things, much like the website Up for Grabs.
Up for Grabs, exactly. So he pulls from several different places, and so this kind of aggregates a ton of stuff. There's also a thing in here for events, upcoming conferences and stuff like that.
Let's step out of the slides and switch over to a live view. So here's Discover.net right now. And we take a look up here at the URL, so you can go there as well. Discover.net.
Yep.
All right. And you're saying,
just he's got a lot of things. Down the bottom, he's got different
recent issues, recent discoveries, cool stuff that's going on in the .NET community.
Yep.
Whether it be a podcast or some video,
all kinds of stuff.
It's a great portal to find awesome .NET open source community resources.
Yep.
Pretty fantastic stuff. Now, another one of those things that's kind of new that we've recently noticed is built with .NET, built with POT.NET. And these are projects that are built on the framework with .NET Core, with Xamarin, with Mono, with Monotone, Unity, any of those things. And this is really important because you can go up there and submit a project. Yeah. So if you've made something and your boss or bosses will let you talk about it, you should go up to Built with .NET and submit it. So you can see, for example, some of the really innovative stuff that you've seen in previous .NET Confs, like HashLayer, right? Doing FPGA hardware work with .NET.
Yeah.
Really, really cool stuff that you would ordinarily have to stumble upon while Googling or writing.
What's so neat with .NET is you can use it to build all kinds of stuff, like there's IoT and web and desktop and all that, and it's a little frustrating sometimes. It feels like after years and years, someone will say, oh, that thing was built with .NET, and you didn't know all the stuff that's out there. So this is a great way to just kind of go, oh, all this stuff, right? You know, from libraries to full projects.
Yeah, that's a good point. So there are full projects and featured projects. It's also worth pointing out that there's a NuGet spotlight. So if you've made a library and you're excited about that library and you want people to see that, sometimes it can be hard for your NuGet project to get that visibility that you're a new library. So if you create something, go and submit it to websites like this and you can see them. We've got YAML libraries for .NET, monitoring, people doing smart home work with things like NetWindows. A lot of people out there work on one thing all day. I talk to people every day, they're like, well, I'm a C# developer and I do WinForms, you know, maybe that's not really exciting, but it works for me. Wait a second, you know C#,
yeah.
You understand Windows. What if you took those C# abilities or those F# abilities and then applied it to your smart home? Ran it on your Raspberry Pi, You may be a Docker container developer and you don't even know it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really need people to understand that. So I would encourage you to check out builtwith.net and discover.net, both really great resources by and for the community.
Yep.
And kudos to the folks that are building those.
And as you pointed out, both of those are common things where you can submit your stuff, submit your projects, submit your events, submit, so get involved. If you're watching this, submit your stuff, let us know about it.
Yeah, I would actually, it would be nice if you knocked their websites over with
Yes.
enthusiasm. I'm sure that they would appreciate that if you did that right away. One of the other things that we've been noticing lately in the .NET community that has a lot of people excited is the enthusiasm around Twitch streaming. Now, Twitch streaming is usually where my kids go to watch Ninja play Fortnite, but I learned first about Twitch streaming, and that means specifically streaming live coding from Noopkat. Noopkat, watching Suze Hinton every Sunday afternoon. She would go up and she would code live on Twitch. I know she's not the first live Twitch coder, but she was the most fun and the one that I spent the most time with. And she worked with Jeff Fritz, and they shared best practices, and now Jeff is becoming a very prolific streamer, and he's now joining a really cool community of streamers, both on Mixer and on Twitch. So Jeff and friends have worked together and have put together a Visual Studio Twitch channel.
Yeah.
Now the intent here is like taking over cable news, right? It's going to be a 24-hour live coding festival.
Yeah.
But right now, it's whenever we have content. Yeah.
But there's a lot up there.
There's a ton of great content.
You go there pretty much any time, it's like, wow, there's stuff going on now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because it's easy to get head down coding and not think about how fun coding can be.
Mm-hmm.
But when you've got 25 people watching, some heckling, some saying, hey, this is semicolon, whatever it is, it's a lot of fun. I've joined Jeff several times and it's a party.
It is fun. It is fun. You'd be surprised how enjoyable it is to actually watch someone code live and spend time with them. And of course, a lot of you are watching this right now on Twitch or on Mixer, so we appreciate that as well. One of the things that's exciting is that you can get involved, and if you are already a Twitch streamer, and this is important, if you're using Twitch or Mixer, let us know. Let us know on Twitter, talk to Jeff, let him know, and we can actually host you on the Visual Studio channel. So we'll give you an audience. We can host you, and we'd love it if you would host us, right? That would be great. You can go up to twitch.tv/Visual Studio. You can see the rules, the code of conduct. You can follow everywhere you are, whether it be YouTube, Twitch, or Mixer. We will be there, and there's a schedule of the regular times that Jeff is up there. And if you want to get into Twitch streaming, you can take a look at both Suze Hinton's blog and Jeff's blog. They both have explanations how to do this. He's got a green screen, which is super cool, and you can see he actually floats his head over in the corner here and explains how to use Open Broadcasting System, which you've actually used now with the community stand-up.
Yeah, we did yesterday. We were actually on Twitch yesterday. So we are now Twitch streamers also.
We are Twitch streamers. Now John is here as a representative of the .NET Foundation, and today we are actually excited to launch a new website for the .NET Foundation.
Website release party. Yeah, so the previous design was very developer design, designed by a developer. So this is actual designers getting in and making it look nice. I'm excited about it. The code is pretty too. It's all Bootstrap 4 and the newest,
And this is Razor.
Razor Pages and everything. One cool new feature in there, the project search, is that's been Anthony Chu built that for us. Our previous project search was not very good. This actually uses Azure Search on the back end. It has cool stuff with functions, so when the repos change, it automatically rebuilds and everything.
So we'll probably see blog posts, videos, and more information about the code behind this, so people can actually go and see the things that power the back end.
Yeah. And I've noticed people like that I've never met have filed bugs on the code before, and so this code is up on GitHub, and there's actually a link in the footer. If you see something wrong, you can go in and file a bug.
So this is an open source website.
It is open source, yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Now, one of the things that's important about the .NET Foundation that I appreciate about it is the idea of getting involved. It's so important. A lot of people will look on a map and they'll say, I want to meet someone, I want to talk about .NET, I want to meet my peers, and I want to give a talk. Yeah. I want to attend a talk, and it's kind of hard to find those folks. But you partnered with Meetup.com.
We did. So actually, last year at .NET Conf, we announced a new initiative where we found a problem where if you were trying to find a meetup about .NET in your area, it was pretty hard to know for certain. You would go and you would find random results without good quality. So we announced a thing where .NET Foundation is sponsoring Meetup Pro. So any meetup that wants to join us can join the .NET Foundation's Meetup Pro group, and then we've got now over 200 worldwide that have joined. And so it's just great to see the continued growth of this, and then this is kind of our center of mass for the .NET communities. So for instance, when we were organizing things for .NET Conf, we used our mailing list to the meetup leaders as one of our primary ways.
Absolutely. And I know for a fact that some of you are in some of these countries that do not have a pin on them. You might say, well, wait a second, I'm in Mali, I'm in South Africa, I know that there are .NET groups down here, but you just haven't told us about those. We would love to get you up in here. We'd like to have you have the support of the foundation, maybe get some swag, get some visibility. We want to get the word out about your community because we're hoping to bring eyeballs of people who are enthusiastic about .NET to here. And if you are in, Tanzania or you're in Iran, I'd love to see your stuff up here.
Exactly.
And the other thing is that when you start up at the .NET Foundation website, you say find a meetup. I want you to scroll down now and remind yourself that the .NET Foundation is a nonprofit that is here to support this ecosystem. And not only are we trying to get people to find meetups, but also create new meetups, start new ones, create new ones. You can learn about different upcoming events. But we've also got resources for you to make your own event. So if you're the first person who had this idea in your town or your country, we want to have resources. So we've got presentations and code.
We do have workshops, and they're regularly updated. Shane, has been kicking butt on this. He's got continuous integration. So as we make code changes for all our little snapshots for the workshops, there's CI builds for it. And actually, the content from .NET Conf, we're going to be putting that up there as well.
That's a really great
fresh presentations for you.
And this is important because .NET is not just global, it's also local. We want to make sure that people who are excited about .NET can give those presentations in their own language. So you can take all of this code and all of these presentations and localize them.
I was thinking about it recently. The first talks I gave were at local meetups. And there were user groups and there were lightning talks.
Yep.
And I was scared to death, and I did a 10-minute talk, and then I did it again and again. And I loved it, but I'm not sure if that was kind of how, I know a lot of developers I talked to, they got started at the meetups.
Absolutely, and I think it's a great way to learn more about your craft. I think that people talk about, well, maybe I'm going to be some kind of rock star developer. That's nonsense. Rock star developers thing, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I just want to hear about really excited, enthusiastic developers who just want to share. And I know that you want to share, you just maybe need an audience.
Yep.
So take some of this code, localize it, make it your own, do your own thing. And again, in your local language would be great. Later this week, we're going to have a lot of .NET Conf content in your local language. Make sure that we get as many people as possible. Super important. So congratulations to you, sir, on the new .NET Foundation website. Now it is, might be a typo here and there. It literally just got pushed live about 10, 15 minutes ago. So if you find an issue, realize we call this the beta launch of the Foundation website. But make sure that you dive into the projects and you figure out what's going on there. Now, there's a number of services that the .NET Foundation provides. If you have an open source project, like let's say you're a one-person Joe or Jane with a project, I worry about what's called the bus factor of the project. That's what happens when, God forbid, someone gets hit by a bus.
Well, I like to say wins the lottery.
Wins the lottery.
It just retires to it.
Okay, we won't call it the bus factor. It's the lottery factor. So I invent Scott.NUDIC package.
Right.
It's amazing. Everyone changes the world, and then I win the lottery and I disappear. What happens to my project?
That's a great thing. So there's two main things we try and do with that. One is we are an open source foundation that handles the kind of legal nitty-gritty of assigning IP so that if you leave intellectual property, exactly, and so that projects that join the .NET Foundation, this includes projects Microsoft's contributed, it includes ones that individual developers have contributed or teams of one or two. They donate their intellectual property to the .NET Foundation, and that way the project is all set. And so not just intellectual property, but also the kind of like the signing, the GitHub rights and that kind of stuff.
Let's be really frank. I must say that there's been some small open source projects that I've worked on, and the connection string to the production database, may or may not have been in a sticky note on my desk.
Right.
If that kind of access, the signing key, the certificates for Baby Smash.
Yeah.
Right? Because I've got a game for babies called Baby Smash. Where's the code signing certificate?
Password
Where's
stuff.
the strong
time, and we've learned over time how projects, what works best for these projects. So we have things like LastPass accounts, Enterprise LastPass. We have, all just different kinds of services set up so that it's kind of a back office for your project.
Nice, back office as a service. So it's that open source back office that provides you with legal support, the copyright support, trademarks, the framework within which to do things. And that's signing certificate things.
Like those signing certificates, we need an SSL cert. We need just all this kind of random stuff in the course of running your project. And you have 2 hours a week when your kids are in bed or whatever. Do you want to hassle with that, or do you want to fix bugs? So we try and do some of this back office stuff for you.
So the .NET Foundation is supporting all of these groups, like you say, over 200 groups, 205, more every day. We want to make sure that you add your group. I want your pins on this diagram, please. I want it on the map here. Now, there are a lot of meetups near you. I want to point something out. In May, there were about 80,000 members.
Yep.
And now, as we approach September, 120,000 and basically 4,000 in just the last month.
Yeah, it's growing really quickly. And some of these are new people joining, and some of these are some that we just didn't know about before. But it's hard to find your meetup, it's hard to know, and so this we're really trying to use this to connect.
Right, so if you know that there's a meetup near you, no matter what country that you're in, please let us know, and then we'll get you on the map, we'll raise those numbers, and we'll let more people get an opportunity to speak, to share, and .NET local meetups are a really great opportunity for you to get the word out about whatever you're working on.
Yep.
Now, we talked about how there are local events. I want to keep hitting on this idea of local, local, local. These are just some of the .NET Conf local events, the viewing parties, or rebroadcasting, or talking about .NET at your local location. Again, you might be disappointed that there's not one near you, but what can you do about that?
You can create one. So there's a link on this page on .NETconf.net.
Mm-hmm.
You click on local events, and there's a link where you can add your own.
Okay, so what is it involved? Do I need to get 100 people in a room to do a local event?
No, 20 people, whatever. Set one up for your work. We're doing some in coordination with people who are just putting on a viewing party at the work.
Okay, so what's involved in this local event? I can pre-download the videos of the stuff that we're doing live right now will be available for download.
Yep.
So I can download that, I can bring the code locally. I can maybe alternate between showing Scott Hunter talking about .NET Core 3 and then a local person doing something innovative with .NET Core.
Yeah, and we've had people build entire conferences around them, many conferences. We've had people take a Saturday or take a full day. We've had others where it's a slightly bigger user group.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Probably one of the happiest things that happened for me last year was watching. There was one in Lagos, Nigeria, where it was just really cool. They put up a bunch of pictures of it, and it was a whole room full of people, and I was like, it's worldwide, it's exciting.
And that's a really good point. One of the things you could also do to help us out is if you are at a meetup now, if you're watching us, even in a team room, send us a picture, put it up on Twitter, hashtag DOTNETConf, CONF, right now, hashtag it, we'll grab that information, we'll try to make sure that we retweet it or get the word out that you are out there right now. I'd love to see 4 people around a projector or 200 or 300 people inside of a college university watching this right now.
So to your point about what's involved in running one of these, really, I know some people would fear commitment of filling in this form, right? But all you're doing is you're putting a dot on the map so people can find you, and you're letting us know so we can send you comments.
We've already had one person yesterday in the .NET Foundation, the .NET Community Stand-Up, who said, wait a second, there's no one in Algeria. I know there's someone in Algeria. Well, you might be. If you are in Algeria, then you should go and look that up.
Exactly.
And to your point about what's going on in Africa right now, well, I got this tweet from Sylvester that I thought was really cool. They've already put together local meetup events in Egypt, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, Mauritius, and Cote d'Ivoire. A lot of cool stuff going on. You should check out on Sylvester's Twitter there. He's got a link to some of the cool stuff that's going on with want you to know that you're up late or you're on your lunch hour and you're doing some cool stuff in open source, whether we're featuring you on stand-up or sending you some video.
And some of the really cool contributions I've seen recently have been bots.
Yeah.
You know, it's a great way to get started. You click on the edit link and contribute something worthwhile to us.
Absolutely. It's really important to point out that you don't have to be someone who is contributing to the CLR, right, the core runtime of .NET, to be an appreciated member of the .NET community. It can be writing another unit test. It can be fixing a misspelling in my README.
Yep.
All of that's appreciated. Or fixing John Galloway's website, which you can be full requests appreciated to the .NET Foundation website that's happening right now. And I also want to remind you of another fun community resource that hopefully some of you are watching, if not all, is the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up.
Yep.
We try to do it on Tuesdays, but sometimes we're traveling. We're getting better.
So we've got it set up now where we used to do it from personal YouTube accounts. Now we actually have this .NET Foundation YouTube channel. And so we alternate 10 a.m. and 3:45 p.m. Pacific time so we can try and get all the time zones.
Absolutely.
And we've been having a lot of PMs and engineers from the team come in and do laptop demos of like, here's some code I wrote last week kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Now, community members might be small. It might be a one-person group who's putting together a project. It might be your NuGet package or your CMS or your website, and you put that up in your GitHub. So you might be a one-person thing, or you might be a huge organization, a giant enterprise. It might be our friends at Little Debbie Snack Case doing work in .NET. I recently got a message from a large company that you might have heard of that's using .NET with some success. You may not have heard about this, but you might be surprised. Roblox. My kids play this all the time. Constantly. This is a community. It's not just a game, but it's actually a community that you can build. So my kids can go to Roblox Studio, download this from the Windows Store, and it's available basically everywhere. Okay? So why should I care about Roblox? Well, it turns out that they use .NET. Wow. Roblox uses .NET for their back end, and they're servicing 70 million users a month. That's active, engaged users a month. So my kids all this time have been talking to services that are written in .NET, and they're currently looking at moving to .NET Core and microservices and containers and things like that. So I'm just really excited to hear about companies big and small, like Roblox or like the .NET Foundation.
We need them to submit to build with them.
I want some Roblox action figures and some swag. But you should definitely check that out. And I want to also point out, it's super fun, the robloxdev.com, where you can learn about their developer kit and learn Roblox, their APIs, and talk to their system, and build games for your family, for your friends. Yeah, sounds fun. So big thanks to Roblox for giving us a heads up that they were on .NET, and that they're moving to .NET Core. A lot of cool stuff happening, and I think being open source just makes the experience that much better for everybody. Now, we're going to have all kinds of great content for the next couple of days with .NET Conf, but I want to point out the virtual attendee party, right? Because this is a conference. Twitter and chat rooms are the hallway track where people hang out. But where do you go for the party? You should go and check out .NETconf.net/party. Let's go and do that right now and see what is the party. Okay, the virtual attendee party, and they're going to have this on day one after the last session, and they're going to be giving away a free Xbox One. Nice. Xbox One X, that's the 4K Xbox. You can, by the way, turn into a dev kit and write code in C#. That virtual attendee party on Twitter and on Twitch is going to be hosted by Richard Campbell from .NET Rocks, you probably know and love. So be sure to check that out on Twitch, hang out with all of the .NET team members, and get some cool prizes throughout that party. We'll be kind of raffling stuff off, which is going to be great. Okay? I also want to point out that putting something like this together isn't just John and myself sitting in front of a big screen. There are a ton of people that help out, as well as our sponsors. And it's important to point those sponsors out. Of course, the .NET Foundation was a big fundamental part of what we were doing, but also other partners here. You can see NetTools and Gnostis, DevExpress, Progress Tolerate, Preemptive, DocuSign, .vpn, Twilio. All of this is meant to enable you to write code in .NET, any developer, any platform, open source, all the way down. That makes me very, very happy. We're going to do a couple of questions as we end our community update here. Yep. So if you have some questions, go
we can't have a, here is the minimum requirements. What we try and look at is we prioritize by projects where a lot of people would be really sad if it went away. You know what I mean? And so for some cases, that's a 1 or 2 person project that is used by many people. For others, it's a project that's important because it's like a leverage endpoint, that sort of thing. So we also we have a backlog and we work through case by case, so it does take some time to get them through. Okay. And we don't want to bring 9,000 projects in and give them bad service either, right? So we kind of scale them.
I see. So the idea isn't that you or the project or whatever is famous, it's that this is a fundamental part of the community, or it's becoming an emerging thing that we all rely on.
Yeah.
If it were to go away, if it were to fall in disrepair, if it were to become unavailable in some way, that the community would suffer.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a heuristic, but hopefully that answers Lance's question. See, people are already letting us know, look, Paul's got a local event in Singapore, .NETConfSG.com. So if you're in or around Singapore, go and check that out. That's pretty exciting. Ben Coden is saying, is there a way to get the list of sites that I said so I don't need to re-watch the clip? Maybe you could go and tweet those for us. So there's discover.net, and buildwith.net. I will tweet both, and you'll tweet both with the .NETConf hashtag, so go and check that stuff out. And then could you be more specific, John, about where Josh would find information on the .NET Foundation to register a new chapter? They've got .NET and Microsoft meetings in Mauritius.
Yeah.
They want to know where to sign up.
So we've got more clear links on those. It used to be a little bit hard to find. Those are some big pink buttons right on the front page of the thing where it says like,
Okay,
hey,
so if
you
we
have-
start here on the .NET Foundation,
So
you can go and get involved, right? You go and say, find out more, and learn about how you can host your own meetup.
And if there is not a clear link, there will be very soon.
Right. So the idea is going to be host a meetup. So maybe a button right on the homepage. Right now, browse resources might be a little bit vague. We'll try to make literally a click a button. Go here, fill out the form. So let's do that. So we'll make sure that in the next build of the foundation website, probably after lunch, we'll add a super clear place to do that. So that's a great question.
An important thing too, some people get hung up on like, hey, we organize using our own website. We don't use, the important thing is we just kind of have meetup. If you can register a meetup and let us know, we can get your pin on a map. But you don't have to like move everything over.
Right, exactly. You're not asking people to host their websites there. You just want a heads up. And if they have a feed of some kind, where they can feed it to Meetup, right? If I understand correctly, you already are doing some great work in Mauritius. You already have your own website. That's all fine. Make sure that you sign up for Meetup Pro. You'll get that through the .NET Foundation. You become a .NET Foundation associated user group. Let Meetup Pro know about your sessions. Where are they? How can people get there? Open to the public, etc. That feed will then show up on that map and in the feed at the .NET Foundation. So if anyone else in Mauritius wants to find an event, they don't have to try for it.
Yep.
Exactly. Cool. Well, we're going to stop right now, and we're going to move back over to some breaks, some content. And I'm sorry. I apologize for staring off in the distance here, but I'm just loving our Steadicam. Can we move over to Steadicam because it's the slow motion Steadicam.
Everyone needs a Steadicam to follow them.
We appreciate you from all of our friends up here in Redmond, Washington, myself and John Galloway. Thanks for watching .NETConf. Please tell your friends and your family and your parents to watch the show, and see you soon.
Out of the box, ASP.NET Core supports a wide variety of providers for handling user authentication. In this video, you'll see how to set up a social authentication provider like Twitter in your web applications. Out of the box, ASP.NET Core comes with support for a various number of authentication providers. In this particular application, we're set up to authenticate using Twitter. If we take a look at our startup.cs file and scroll down to our configure services method, you can see that we're leveraging the dependency injection system to add services that not only enable authentication, but also enable us to authenticate using Twitter. Down in the area where we're setting up Twitter, you can see that we're also pulling in the client ID and client secret from the configuration. Let's go over to our browser really quickly. Now, if I go to apps.twitter.com, I've already set up a demo application that we're going to use for this demonstration. If I head over to keys and access tokens, underneath application settings, you'll see the consumer key and consumer secret that we're pulling in inside of our code. Now let's head back to Visual Studio. If I go over to our login.cs HTML file, what I have here is a simple form that's going to send our user over to the social login action inside of our controller. Also, notice our button. It has a name of provider and a value of Twitter. Before we take a look at any more code, let's just go ahead and run this application so you can see what it looks like. I'm going to click the login button at the top right. Now here I put a button on the screen that allows me to select Twitter. Now what's happened is that I've sent a post request over to our social login page, and it's pulling that provider information from that button. No issue with the challenge request, passing in the provider, and also the callback that we'll need to send our users to after they've been authenticated. Let's go ahead and continue. Now, if we head over to our browser, I can see a screen that looks something like this. And now essentially it's asking me if I want to allow this application to use my Twitter information. I'll click on authorize. And now we've been sent over to that callback. Now what I can do here is pull in claims that have been provided to us by Twitter, and also I can even add some of my own. I'll create a new claims identity, a new claims principal, and I'll go ahead and sign in our user to our application. Let's head back to the browser. And now you can see we're logged into our application. So I can click on this search bar section, and you can witness my wonderful design skills showing off some very secure content. If you're interested in learning more, take a look at some of these resources below. We'd also love to get any feedback you might have, so feel free to send it over. Enjoy the rest of .NET.
Hey, welcome back. For those of you who weren't here for the keynote, I'm Matt Torgerson, and I'm the lead designer for the C# language. So the next hour we're going to spend talking about some of the things that we recently added to C# and some of the things that we're planning to add. And hopefully there'll be time for a few questions from you guys as well. So when we're looking at the Stack Overflow survey that goes out every year to developers, I always like to open that up and see how are we doing with C#. Here's the top many languages. I've sliced out the ones that I don't consider to be programming languages, and this is what you get. So if you look at the most popular programming languages, the ones that most people use, or at least most developers who respond to the survey, you can see that C# is prominently figured there. There's a lot of people using C#, and we're happy to note that more and more of them are using C# cross-platform on many different platforms. We also look at the most loved programming languages. This is where the smaller languages get to play, because this is measured in terms of the percentage of users who would like to continue using that language. And we're happy to see that C# is represented here as well. So we are in good shape in terms of both people using C# but also liking it and not just doing it because they have to. Sometimes it's interesting to look at some of the other languages that are on here. If you think about other languages that are on both of these top 10s, Python's been there along with C# for a couple of years. Last year TypeScript joined, so yay, go Microsoft. You also see F# down there as one of the most loved, though it's not quite made the top 10 in terms of usage yet. This year, a couple more joined. The Swift language essentially has been loved for a while, now rose to higher usage. And the JavaScript language, a lot of people are very happy with the JavaScript language now. So that was a little baffling to us, but I think that there's a common trend among many of these languages, which is that we all take quite an aggressive approach to evolution and making sure that there are all the tools in the box for people to use in professional development. So that leads us to, what is the strategy for C# actually? What are we thinking about? What are the goalposts that we use when we think about what to do with C#, the language itself, as well as the platform around it? And there's actually a link here which you can go click that takes you to where we post our language strategy for C#, Visual Basic, and F#. So you can compare. I pulled out some of the main phrases here for C#, which is, first and foremost, we'll keep growing C#. So whenever there are evolving needs, whenever there are new scenarios that we want to embrace, and whenever there's new technology or new ideas in the language space that would fit well into C#, we will completely embrace it. And we'll also innovate aggressively ourselves, So we're not afraid to sometimes take the lead and introduce a new feature, a new kind of feature that other languages can then use to move their needle as well. So you've seen that several times over the years with C#. It's important for us to recognize that we have a very broad set of developers. We have great diversity in the developer base, and so therefore we have to focus our improvements mostly on things that benefit all developers, or most developers. Sometimes they benefit them directly, and a few times they benefit them more indirectly, as you will see in the features I'm going to show later in this talk. And then last but definitely not least, we'll continue to empower the ecosystem. In other words, to improve the influence and the dialogue that the broader C# community has on the evolution of the language itself. So this is clearly something that's evolved over the years. Now we're completely open source, and if we get time, we can go and look a little at that as well later in the talk. The language design itself is open source, and there's a daily dialogue with the community rather than every 2 or 3 years when we would release a new version and hope that people liked it. So this has been a great trend for us, and that's something that we're quite determined to keep evolving that relationship with the community. That said, we also want to balance this with continuing what we think is one of the successes of C#, which is that we try to exercise very strong stewardship of the language and the design decisions, so that there's one body of designers that have been in it for a long time and can guarantee continuity and coherence of the language as it evolves. So it's not sort of a design by committee, democracy kind of design environment. There's still a little group of us that are making the ultimate decisions and making sure that all the people who are more interested in using C# and less interested in evolving it, that they get solid experience going forward, and they get a well-curated language, if you want. So that's kind of our mindset that we apply when we go into language design, which we do several times a week. So here are kind of the main phrases from there. Keep growing C#, innovate aggressively, benefit all developers, empower the ecosystem, and show strong stewardship. So let's talk about some of the recent and coming versions of C#. So over the last year and a bit, we released no less than 3 point releases of C#. That's kind of a new thing for us to have point releases. We usually have major releases every couple of years that have major numbers, like something.o. And in fact, when we got to 6, we figured we were never going to have anything but .o releases, and we started talking about it just as C#6, not C#6.0. But with 7, that changed. We realized that we had evolved so much in our process that we were able to ship more often. And also, we didn't want to hold back value that developers could get sooner if they wanted to, while at the same time recognizing that smaller steps maybe shouldn't be something that everyone is forced to use. So we reintroduced this divide between major and minor versions. We also had some specific scenarios that span across all of the .NET layers, if you will, that were related to framework and runtime work as well as language work. And we wanted to ship those as a package. And so this was a good time to exercise doing sort of out-of-band releases of C#, if you will. So that's what C# 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3 were about. More specifically, the sort of core, there are a couple of driving themes here. The core driving theme is one about safe, efficient code. So this is a feature set that is primarily targeted at people doing somewhat lower level programming in C#. So they're sort of the direct beneficiaries, if you will. But because they're building the lower levels of what everyone else builds on, there's direct benefit, certainly in terms of the improved performance that those frameworks can get, but sometimes also the abstractions that they can offer are better because of these features. So it's something that has a positive impact on everyone, even though many people don't need to relate to it so much. So we'll spend our time talking about 7.1 to 3 here, primarily focusing on these safe, efficient features, and I'll show some demos. I did a short one in the keynote earlier this morning, if you saw that, but there were various any difficulties there. So I'll try to get that whole demo flow a little more expanded this time and show all those features. There are also just general improvements, things that used to be not allowed that are now allowed, such as using delegate or enum as constraints and generics, and many more things. There are also the usual set of nice abbreviations that let you write things shorter than you used to. I have a link at the end of the deck where you can go and look at our docs at docs@microsoft.com, and they generally have very good, but they do have very good summaries of what's new in the individual versions and so on. I encourage you to go and look at all the things I don't explain here, even the ones I do, and kind of get the details on it. So then there's C# 8, which is our next planned version that's coming up sometime later. And the main theme here is for it just to be magical. Like, this is where we want to do actually a not very tightly related set of features that all are bigger and have more of an impact on how you program and hopefully take your development to a new level. So I allowed myself one unicorn today here, and this is it. Before we dive into that, though, let's take that thorough look at C# 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3. So let me go into Visual Studio and start out with this particular project here. So I want to talk about the improvements we made around ref. So some of you may have noticed there's a ref keyword in the language. You probably don't use it very much, but I'm going to show how several improvements and new things here can make working with structs a lot easier and a lot safer. Like, give you a lot of places where you don't need to reach for unsafe code, for instance, and pointers. And then building on that, we'll talk about the new span of T features in a minute. Ref is really a feature for passing things by reference. And since objects are already passed by reference, like you never copy an object to somewhere else, you always just pass a reference to it, this is primarily interesting to structs. So if you're trying to improve your performance and avoid allocations by using structs, then you'll want to use these features. And if you don't, because you're at a higher level, then be thankful that somebody further down are doing it. Like the improvements you saw in a Tech Empower benchmark from Pino, those derive, among many other things, from starting to adopt these features here. So, just as a reminder, I have a little program here that has a method that takes two ints, returns an int, which is one of the two that it got in, and then mutates them and writes a few things out. And let's do this by ref instead of passing the ints by value. We'll now pass refs to the ints. So you see that when I put the ref modifier on the method here, I get a squiggle down here saying I'm asking for parameters by ref, but I'm not passing them by ref. So the arguments also in C# ever since C# 1.0 have to have a ref modifier saying, hey, you're not passing the value that's in A and B, you're passing the actual variable A and B, and you're passing it to someone so that they can change it and modify the variables that you declare here and that you see. Okay? So that's been around for a long time. One of the my cheat sheet here. So one of the things that you haven't been able to do is to use extension methods where this parameter, the receiver of the extension method was a ref. So that's something that we added recently. So you can now say this here, and then you get an extension method that if I choose, I can go and call it with A as a receiver. And now I need to remove the first argument, and I'm passing it with A instead. So you see in this case, where I'm calling as receiver, I don't have to say ref for the usage of A here. And we think that's all right because when you're calling things as an instance method, you're kind of expecting that to be able to mutate the receiver. So we think that sort of the visual cue is good enough without having to sort of massage the ref keyword into the syntax here somewhere. So that's extension methods. Another thing that we wanted to improve was using refs without fear. Okay, so I talked about this this fear-inducing step, passing your actual variable to someone else who might mutate it, which is the case here. They actually do mutate it. But what if I want to pass, let's say it's not int, but it's big struct. I want to pass it by ref for efficiency's sake, but I don't actually want them to mutate it. That's something that we then went and added new features for in C# 7.2. So instead of a ref parameter, let's say we want, for y, we want to protect it against mutation, I can pass it as an in parameter. And now that means that it's still passed by reference, but you can see the method is no longer allowed to mutate it. So the mutation of it is forbidden. And that means that the method here, or the main method here, can safely pass it. So I'm going to, so I don't get to use the ref keyword anymore because I'm now passing it by in, so to speak. So I can use the in keyword instead, still matching that, doing the keyword match here. And that means, you know, I acknowledge that they can see whatever changes I make to B, but they can't make any changes themselves. Now, that looks an awful lot like passing things by value, except that it's more efficient. And so we actually do allow you to not even say the in keyword. You don't need to be warned in syntax that you're passing something by in, because the people you're passing it to won't be able to do anything with it. So you can actually omit the in keyword altogether and pass just a variable like that. And in fact, if you do that, you can even pass something that's not a variable, like 40, let's just use 42 here, and we will automatically create a variable in the background and pass it as a read-only ref to the method. Okay, so so that's in parameters. Now, a thing that we introduced a little while back is ref returns. So I actually want this method not just to return the value of one of the variables, but to actually select one of the variables and return the variable itself. So I can do that by returning by ref. Okay, so now I'm returning either, in this case, I'm returning x by ref, and I have to acknowledge that by returning the ref to the x variable here. And that's fine, but here I'm still, so I'm returning it by ref, but I'm still taking the value and putting it into the C variable here. If I want the ref itself, the reference to the variable, I have to sort of take the ref like I do when I pass a ref parameter, and then I have to declare the variable as being a ref as well. So now C is no longer a variable holding an int, but it's a variable pointing to another variable holding an int. Right? And which variable that is, that comes from the ref initializer here, which is whatever comes back from the or maybe method. So in this case, you can see since it returns a ref to its x parameter, which we pass the a variable for that, then C will actually be an alias to the a variable. And so when I increase it here, you can try running it, and I increase the variable here, you can see that the a variable changes as well. So there you go, you can see that a and C are aliases to the same variable here. So in general, you have this idea that a ref is sort of like a window onto another variable. And then you have some storage, and you have a window onto the storage. And if you use in instead of ref, the window is closed. You can see through it, but you can't reach through it and manipulate the thing. So there's this open window and closed window analogy that we can exploit a little further down the line. You can also actually make the thing that comes back from a method read-only. So I could return a ref read-only to int here, and that makes the caller not able to mutate the variable that they get back. So here we get an error because I am storing it as a ref and then mutating it, but I have to store it as a ref read-only to promise that I won't mutate it before the method call will let me grab that ref and hold on to it. And now I said I can't mutate it, and so I get a squiggle here when I try to do it anyway, and I have to stop doing it. The nice thing about that is that if I didn't have read-only here, so let's just remove that for a second, and if I pass the x parameter by in, now I have X is a read-only thing, and so I'm not allowed to return its ref to someone who might mutate it. And in order to keep the contract, the thing I promised here by saying in to X, I have to also make it read-only when I return it back out again in order for the squiggle there to go away. And then I can't mutate that one. So you see how it all hangs together? The protection, the extra protection of in and of read-only kind of flows through the whole thing and guarantees that you only mutate things that you want to. Now, that was a whole lot about ref, and why is that interesting? Well, part of why it's interesting is that in a subtle way, ref and ref read-only are part of the span of T story that was this framework runtime and language feature set that we rolled out recently, and that's part of C# 7.2 and 7.3. So let's go and have a look at span. Span is kind of like ref, but for whole arrays, for like contiguous memory, if you will. So where a ref is a window onto a single variable, a span is a window onto a whole array, or like a chunk of an array. And let's see that in action here. So I have a program here where I create an array, I initialize it, and I write out all the elements. So let's go and try to play the span in this program. And this is the demo that didn't work out so well in the keynote this morning, and hopefully it works out better today. So if you go and look at array, you can see there are a couple of new extension methods. One of them is asspan, which lets me get a span from the array, whatever that means. So asspan returns a span of int. Let's grab that span of int into the variable called span. And now what we have is essentially an alias for the array. It's a window onto the same elements. And we can see that by writing out the elements in the span instead of the ones in the array. And you should be able to still see the initialized values here from 0 to 9, even though I took the span, if you will, before I initialized the array. So if the span had copied over values, it would still be all 0. If you want to further assure yourself of it, we can also turn it around and actually initialize through the span and write out the elements of the array. And you can see by initializing through the span, I'm reaching through the window and manipulating the array that the span points to, that it's an open window to, if you will. And just like let's get to that in a second. But one of the things that you might want to think about is what can you then do with the span? Well, you can do many of the same things that you can do with an array, but you can also do other things. And one of the things you can do is that you can slice them. So I can take a slice of a span, for instance, from the third element and 5 elements on from there. And what that returns to me is another span that's only to part of it. So it's still to some of the same memory locations, but with some of them sliced out. And so if I write out the elements of the slice here, you can see that I only get the ones from 3 to 7, which are the ones that I sliced out. But I'm still looking at the elements that only got initialized after I created the slice, so still no copying of the array. And we can also modify through a slice, so I could do slice of 2 equals 42, and then actually write out the elements in the span, and you can see that I modified the one that was the second element from the slice's point of view, but which is actually the 5th element or 6th element, and I count of the underlying array and the span that I created in the slice. So it all kind of works out. Windows onto the same memory, and you can imagine how you can manipulate these in various ways and have nice method signatures that pass refs and spans around without copying. The thing that's kind of missing here still that was in the ref story is if I pass a span to someone, how can I prevent them from modifying the thing that the span refers to? And similar to ref read-onlys, there's a read-only span type that you can just convert your span to, and that prevents modification. So you can see that if I make the slice read-only span, then I don't get to reach through the window and manipulate it. All right, so that's the deal with span. There's one C# 8 feature that I'm actually gonna that I can't show you today. We have shown it before, but the bits are currently in a state where I can't demo it. But it's going to be quite interesting in connection with this, as well as many other things. And that is that indexing in C# is kind of basic. You can pass, like for instance, to an array, you can or a span here, you can pass an int and you get that number element. One thing you can't do is, for instance, say, I want the third element from last. You have to do your own math in order to compute based on the length, the current length of the array or the span. You have to compute the third element from last. So we're introducing a little syntax to do that. It's not going to work here, but I'm going to type it anyway. So we use the little hat symbol to say from end, essentially. And that's useful in and of itself. But one of the things that we then also want to use it for is to introduce a notion of ranges into the syntax of C#. And one of the places where that will come in really neat is, for instance, for the slicing operator here, instead of having to call a method and giving these parameters, well, we could just index the span with a range from, say, 3 to 7, 3 dot 7, or one I had there, 3 dot 8, or maybe 3 dot the third from last, or whichever combination of indexing and range syntaxes you want here. And the ranges are also planned to be open-ended optionally, so you can say 3 dot from 3 to the end, or you can say from the beginning to 7, or you can actually just say all of it. So there's a range that's open on both sides, and just mean get me the whole thing, which is something that you might want to do if you were, for instance, slicing on multiple dimensions, and some of them you don't want to narrow in, and so it's convenient syntax to not have any of the endpoints visible. So that's something that we have a prototype of, and it's going into C#8. But from here, I want to go back to I want to go over to another demo and sort of move firmly into things that we're doing in C#8. That's a demo of the nullable reference types features that we're adding. And then after that, we'll see some slides, other features that are planned to go into C#8 right after I type my password. So now you can get to see how long my password is. There we go. Luckily, I didn't need two-factor authorization here. It would have taken long. So here is this is on a remote machine, and that's because the bits aren't working on my machine right now. But this is an example of a program that looks completely innocent and innocuous, but it's actually dangerous. And this is if you go through the program here, you can say I have a person with a first name and a last name. It's Miguel. I get his middle name and I write it out. And the method that gets a middle name does exactly what you'd expect. It gets the middle name and gets the length. Okay. So that looks fine, and there are no flashing warning signs, but if I compile and run it, then you probably won't be surprised, because you're probably as scarred as I am, that you will, once we're done compiling, we won't actually get the length of Miguel's non-existing middle name. We'll get a runtime exception. That's a null reference exception. And that's something that we got so used to, but it's still very hard to keep the null reference exceptions out of our production code because we don't have proper tools at development time to kind of minimize the situations where we accidentally run into a null. This kind of situation is a little hard because it's unclear who's to blame here. Is the method here to blame for getting the length of the middle name, or is the is the constructor to blame for putting a null in there in the first place? Who decides what the contract is? Should a middle name, should a property be able to be null or not? That's where we figured it's time for some more expressiveness in C# and to have a feature that helps you deal with that. And so let's go and look at that person class and start from there. There's a new feature in town. It gives you extra warnings, so you kind of have to turn it on. And that feature is nullable reference types. So in order to turn that on, I use an attribute here. So at the module level, I'll specify the attribute non-null types. And that attribute, what it says is that with this attribute, we're going to start considering all your reference types to be non-null. And we're going to warn you if we see you sticking nulls in them. Okay? So we're strengthening the contract around all the reference types that are in your code today, saying from now on, we're not going to let them be null any longer. We're not going to give you errors, but we're going to give you warnings to help you not do them. So obviously that can only be part of the story, but it's a pretty useful part of the story, and we'll get to the other half in a little bit. So what you see now that I have that turned on, I get a warning on the person constructor here that only initializes the first and last name, and the warning says you are not initializing the non-nullable property middle name. You are not making it not null. Well, I can go and fix that warning real quick. I can initialize it. A middle name is equals null. Now I don't get the warning anymore. But I get another warning saying, hey, you can't put a null in there either. You can't leave a null, and you can't put a null. Well, what can I do then? This is the other half